Ned and the girls were 8 days gone when Master Llewellyn came to her one night in Bran's sick room carrying a reading lamp and the books of account. "It is time past that we reviewed the figures, my lady," he said. "You'll want to know how much this royal visit cost us." Catelyn looked at Bran in his sick bay and brushed his hair back off his forehead. It grew very long, she realized. She would have to cut it soon. "I have no need to look at figures, Master Llewellyn," she told him, never taking her eyes off of Bran. "I knew what the visit cost us. Take the books away." "My lady, the king's party had a healthy appetite. We must replenish our stores before—" She cuts him off. "I said take the books away. The stern will attend to our needs." "We have no sterns," Master Llewellyn reminded her. A little grey rat, she thought. He would not let go. Bull went south to establish Lord Edward's household at King's Landing. Catelyn nodded absently. "Oh, yes, I remember." Bran looked so pale. She wondered whether they might move his bed under the window, so he can get the morning sun. Master Llewellyn set the lamp in a niche by the door and fiddled with its wick. "There were several appointments that required your immediate attention, my lady. Beside the steward, we need a captain of the guards to fill Jarbo's place, and a new master of horse." Her eye snapped around and found him. "A master of horse?" her voice whipped. The Minster was shaken. "Yes, my lady. Hullen rode south with Lord Edward, so my son lies here broken and dying, Llewellyn, and you wish to discuss new masters of horse. Do you think I care what happens in the stables? Do you think it matters to me what wit? I would gladly butcher every horse in Winterfell with my own hand if it would open Bran's eyes. Do you understand that? Do you?" He bellowed his head. "Yes, my lady, but the appointments—" I'll make the appointments, Robb said. Catelyn had not heard him enter, but there he stood in the doorway, looking at her. She had been shouting, she realized with a sudden flush of shame. What was happening to her? She was so tired and her head hurt all the time. Master Llewellyn looked from Catelyn to her son. "I have prepared a list for those whom wish to consider for our vacant offices," he said, offering Robb a paper plucked from his sleeve. Her son glanced at the names. He had come from outside, Catelyn saw. His cheeks were red and cold, his hair shaggy in the wind blown. "Good men," he said. "We talk about them tomorrow." He handed them back to their list of names. "Very good, my lord." The papers vanished into his sleeves. "Leave us now," Robb said. Master Llewellyn bowed and departed. Robb closed the door behind him and turned to her. He was wearing a sword, she saw. Mother, what are you doing?" Catelyn had always thought Bran looked like her, like Bran and Rickon and Susanna. He had the Tully colouring, and auburn hair and blue eyes, yet now for the first time she saw something of Edward in his face, something as stern and hard as the north. "What am I doing?" she echoed, puzzled. "How can you ask that? What do you imagine I'm doing? I'm taking care of your brother. I'm taking care of Bran." "Is that what you call it? You haven't left his room since Bran was hurt. You didn't even come to the gate when father and the girls went south. I said my farewells to them here, and watched them ride out from the window." She begged Ned not to go. Not now. Not after what had happened. Everything had changed now. Couldn't he see that? It was no use. He had no choice. He had told her. And then he left, choosing. "I can't leave him. Not for a moment. Not when any moment could be his last. I have to be with him. If... She took her son's limp hand, sliding his fingers through her own. He was so frail and thin, no strength left in his hand. But she could still feel warmth of life through his skin. Robb's voice softened. "He's not going to die, Mother. Master Llewellyn says the time of greatest danger has passed. And what if Master Llewellyn is wrong? What if Bran needs me, and I'm not here? Rickon needs you. Rickon needs you, Robb said shortly. He's only 3. He doesn't understand what's happening. He thinks everyone has deserted him. So, what do you do with him? He paused a moment, chewing on his lower lip, the way he had done when he was little. Mother, I need you too. I'm trying, but I can't. I can't do it all by myself. His voice broke with sudden emotion, and Catelyn remembered that he was only 14. She wanted to get up and go to him, but Bran was still holding her hand, and she could not move. Outside the tower, a wolf began to howl. Catelyn trembled just for a second. Bran's! Robb opened the window and let the night air into the stuffy tower room, and the howling grew louder, with its cold and lonely sound, full of melancholy and despair. Don't, she told him. Bran needs to stay warm. He needs to hear them sing, Robb said. Somewhere out in the Winterfell, a second wolf began to howl in chorus with the first. Then the third, closer. Shaggy Dog and Grey Wind. Bran said, with their voices rose and fell together. You can tell them apart if you listen close. Catelyn was shaking. It was the grief of the cold, the howling of the direwolves. Night after night, the howling and the cold wind and the grey, empty castle. On and on they went, never changing, and her boy lay there broken, the sweetest of her children, the gentlest. Bran, who loved to laugh and climb and dreamt of knighthood, all gone now. She would never hear him laugh again. Sobbing, she put her hand free of his, and covered her ears against those trembling howls. Make them stop, she cried. I can't stand it. Make them stop, make them stop. Kill them all if you must. Just make them stop. She didn't remember falling to the floor, but there she was, and Robb was lifting her, holding her arm strong. Don't be afraid, Mother. They would never hurt him. He helped her to the narrow bed in the corner of the sick room. Close your eyes, he said gently. Rest. Master Luwin tells me you've hardly slept since Bran's fall. I can't, she wept. Gods forgive me, Robb. I can't. If he dies while I'm asleep. What if he dies? What if he dies? The wolves were still howling. She screamed and held her ears again. Oh, gods, close the window. If you swear to me you'll sleep, Robb went to the window. But as he reached the shutters, another sound was added to the mournful howling of direwolves. Dogs, he said, listening. All the dogs are barking. They've never done that before. Catelyn heard his breath catching his throat. When she looked up, his face was pale in lamplight. Fire, he whispered. Fire, she thought. And then Bran. Help me, she said urgently, sitting up. Help me with Bran. Robb did not seem to hear her. The library's towers were on fire, he said. Catelyn could see the flickering reddish light through the open window now. She sagged with relief. Bran was safe. The library was across the bailey. There was no way the fire would reach them here. Thank the gods, she whispered. Bran shook her head as if she'd gone mad. Mother, stay here. I'll come back as soon as the fire's out. He ran then. She heard him shout to the guards outside the room, heard them descending together with a wild rush, taking the stairs 2 and 3 at a time. Outside there were shouts of fire, in the yard screams, running, footsteps and whining, frightening horses, and the frantic barking of the castle dogs. The howling was gone, she realized, as she listened to the canopy. The dire wolves had fallen silent. Catelyn said a silent prayer of thanks to the 7 faces of gods as she went to the window. Across the bailey stepped long tongues of flames shot from the window of the library. She watched the smoke rise into the sky, and thought sadly of all the books the Starks had gathered over the centuries. Then she closed the shutters. When she turned away from the window, the man was standing in a room with her. You weren't supposed to be here, he muttered sourly. No one was supposed to be here. He was a small, dirty man in filthy brown clothing, and he stank of horses. Catelyn knew all the men who worked in the stables, and he was none of them. He was a grunt with a limp blonde hair and pale eyes. Deep sunk in a bony face, there was a dagger in his hand. Catelyn looked at the knife, then at Bran. No, she said. The words had sunk in her throat. The merced whisper. He must have heard her. It's a mercy, he said. He's dead already. No, Kathleen said, louder as she found her voice again. No, you can't. He spun back toward the room window to scream for help, but the man moved faster than she would have believed. One hand clamped down her mouth and yanked back to her head, and another brought the dagger up to her windpipe. The stench of his was overwhelming. She reached up with both hands and grabbed the blade with all her strength, pulling away from her throat. She heard him crushing into her ear. His fingers were slippery with blood, but she would not let go of the dagger. The hand over her mouth clenched more tightly, shuttered off her air. Kathleen twisted her head, and this side of managed to get a piece of his flesh between her teeth. She bit down so hard into his palm, the man grunted in pain. She grounded her teeth together and tore him off, and all of a sudden he let go. The taste of blood filled her mouth. She sunk in air and screamed, and he grabbed her hair and pulled away from him and she stumbled and went down. And then he was standing over her, breathing hard, shaking. The dagger was still clenched tightly in his right hand, slick with blood. You weren't supposed to be here, he repeated stupidly. Kathleen saw the shadow slip through the open door behind him. There was a low rumble, less than a snarl, with a mere whisper of threat, but he must have heard something, because he started to turn just as the wolf made its leap. Then went down together, half sprawled over Caitlin, where she had fallen. The wolf had him under the jaw. The man's shriek lasted less than a second before the beast wrenched back his head, shaking out half his throat. His blood felt like warm rain as it sprayed across her face. The wolf was looking at her. Its jaws were red and wet with his eyes, glowed golden in the dark room. It was Bran's wolf, she realized. Of course it was. Thank you, Kathleen whispered, her voice faint and tiny. She lifted her hand, trembling. The wolf patted closer, sniffing at her fingers, then licked the blood with a wet, rough tongue. When it had cleaned off all the blood in her hand, it turned away silently and jumped onto Brent's bed and lay down beside him. Kathleen began to laugh hysterically. That was the way they found him. When Rob and Laster Lewin and Sir Radric burst with half the guards of Winterfell. When the laughter finally died in her throat, they wrapped her in her warm blankets and led her back into the great keep. To all her chambers, old Nan undressed her and helped her into a scalding hot bath and washed her blood off her with a soft cloth. Afterward, Master Lewin arrived to dress her wounds. The cuts in her fingers were deep, almost to the bone, and her scalp was raw and bleeding where he had pulled out a handful of hair. The minister told her the pain was just starting now, and gave her milk of the poppy to help her sleep. Finally she closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they told her that she had slept for 4 days. Kathleen nodded and sat up in bed. It all seemed like a nightmare to her now. Everything since Bran's fall, a terrible dream of blood and grief. But the pain in her hands reminded her that it was real. Weak and light-headed, yet strangely resolute, as if a great weight had been lifted from her. "Bring me some bread and honey," she told her servants, "and take the word to Master Lewin that my bandages were not changing." They looked at her in surprise and ran to her bidding. Kathleen remembered the way she had been before, and she was ashamed. She had let them all down, her children, her husband, her house. It would not happen again. She showed her northerners how strong a Tully of River Run could be. Rob arrived before her food. Roger Cassio came with him, and her husband's warden Theon Greyjoy, and lastly Hollis Mulblin, a muscular guardsman with a square brown beard. He was the new captain of the guard, Rob said. Her son was dressed in a boiled leather and ringmail. She saw, and the sword hung to his waist. Who is he? Catelyn asked him. No one knows his name, Hallis Muller told her. He was no man of the Winterfell, my lady, but some say they had seen him here and about the castle these past few weeks. One of the king's men, then, she said, or none of the Lannisters. He could have waited behind when the others left. Maybe, Hal said, with all these strangers filling up Winterfell late. But there was no way of saying who he belongs to. He had been hiding in your stables, Greyjoy said. He could smell it on him. And how could he get unnoticed? She said sharply. Hallis Mellon looked abashed. Between the horses Lord Ed Stark took south, and them whence we set north to the night's watch, and stalled were half empty, and it was no great trick to hide from the stable boys. They could be Hodor saw him, and the talking to the boys been acting queer, but simply as he is. Hal shook his head. We found where he's been sleeping, Robb put in. He has 90 silver stags in a leather bag buried beneath the straw. It's good to know my son's life was not sold cheaply, Catelyn said bitterly. Hallis Mullen looked at her confused. Begging your grace, my lady, you saying he was out to kill your boy? Greyjoy was doubtful. That's madness. He came for Bran, Catelyn said. He kept muttering how I wasn't supposed to be there. He set the library fire, thinking I would rush to put it out, taking the guards with me. If I hadn't been mad with grief, it would have worked. Why would anyone want to kill Bran? Robb said. He's only a little boy, helpless, sleeping. Catelyn gave her firstborn a challenging look. If you are to rule in the north, you must think these things through, Robb. Answer your own question. Why would anyone want to kill a sleeping child? Before he could answer, the servants returned with a plate full of food fresh from the kitchen. There was much more than she asked for. Hot bread, butter and honey, and blackberry preserves, and a rasher of bacon, and a soft-boiled egg, a wedge of cheese, a pot of mint tea, and with it came Master Luwin. How is my son, Menster? Catelyn looked at all the food and found she had no appetite. Menster lowered his eyes. Unchanged, my lady. It was a reply that she had expected. No more and no less. Her hands throbbed with pain, as if she had a blade were still in her, cutting deep. She sent the servants away and looked back to Robb. Do you have the answer yet? Someone is afraid of Bran might wake up, Robb said, afraid of what he might say or do, afraid of something he might know. Catelyn was proud of him. Very good. She turned to the new captain of guards. We must keep Bran safe. If there is one killer, there could be others. How many guards do you want, my lady? Hal asked. So long as Lord Edward is away, my son is master of Winterfell, she told him. Robb stood a little taller. Put one man in the sick room night and day. One outside the door, two at the bottom of the stairs. No one sees Bran without my warrant or my mother's. As you say, my lord. Do it now, Catelyn suggested. And let his wolf stay in the room with him, Robb added. Yes, Catelyn said. And then again, yes. Hallis Mullen bowed and left the room. Lady Stark, Sir Roderick said when the guardsman had gone. Do you chance to notice the dagger that the killer used? The circumstance did not allow me to examine it closely, but I can vouch for its edge, Catelyn replied with a dry smile. Why do you think? We found the knife still in the villain's grasp. It seemed to me that it was altogether too fine a weapon for such a man, so I looked into a little harder. The blade was Valyrian steel, and the hilt dragonbone, a weapon like that has no business being in hands of such of him. Someone gave it to him. Catelyn nodded thoughtfully. Robb closed the door. He had looked at her strangely, but he did as she told him. What I'm about to tell you must not leave this room, she told him. I want your oaths on that. If even the part that what I suspect is true, Ned and my girls have ridden into a deadly danger, and a word in the wrong ears could mean their lives. Lord Edward is a second father to me, said Theon Greyjoy. I do swear. You have my oaths, Master Lewin said, and mine, my lady, Sir Roderick, echoed Sir Roderick. She looked at her son. And you, Rob? He nodded his consent. My sister Lisa believes that Lannister murdered her husband, Lord Edrin, the Hand of the King. Catelyn told them, It comes to me that Jaime Lannister did not join the hunt the day Bran fell. He remained in the castle. The room was deadly quiet. I don't think Bran fell from the tower, she said into the stillness. I think he was thrown. The shock was the plain on their face. My lady, that's a monstrous suggestion, said Broderick Cassiel. Even the Kingslayer would flinch at the murder of an innocent child. Or would he, Theon Greyjoy? I wonder. There is no limit to a Lannister's pride or a Lannister ambition, Catelyn said. The boy had always been sure-handed in the past, Master Lewin said thoughtfully. He knew every stone in Winterfell. Gods, Rob said. Gods, Rob swore, his young face dark with anger. If that is true, he will pay for it. He drew his sword and waved it in the air. I'll kill him myself. Sir Roderick battled him. Put that away, Lannister. The Lannister are 100 leagues away. Never draw your sword unless you mean to use it. How many times must I tell you, foolish boy? Abashed, Rob sheathed his sword, suddenly a child again. Catelyn said to Sir Roderick, I see my son is wearing steel now. The old master-at-arms said, I thought it was time. Rob was looking at her anxiously. Past time, she said. Winterfell may need all of its swords soon, and they had best not to be made of wooden. Theon Greyjoy put a hand in the hilt of his blade and said, My lady, if it comes to that, my house owes you great debt. Master Lewin pulled his chain collar where it chafed against his neck. All we have is a conjecture. This is the king's beloved brother we mean to accuse. He will not take it kindly. We must have proof, or forever keep silent. Your proof is in the dagger, Sir Roderick said. A fine blade like that will not have gone unnoticed. There was only one place to find the truth of it, Catelyn realized. Someone must go to the King's Landing. I'll go, Rob said. No, she told him. Your place is here. You must always be a Stark in Winterfell. She looked at Sir Roderick with his great white whiskers, at Master Lewin, and his grey robes, at young Greyjoy, lean and dark, and impetuous. Who to send? Who would be believed? Then she knew. Catelyn struggled to push back the blankets. Her bandaged fingers are stiff and unyielding as stone. She climbed out of bed. I must go myself. My lady, said Master Lewin, is that wise? Surely the Lannister would greet your arrival with suspicion. What about Bran? Rob asked. The poor boy looked utterly confused. You can't mean to leave him. I've done everything I can for Bran, she said, laying the wounded hand in one arm. His life is in the hands of the gods, and Master Lewin, as you reminded yourself, Rob said, I have no other children to think of now. You will need a strong escort, my lady, Theon said. I'll send Hal with a squad of guardsmen, Rob said. No, Catelyn said. A large party attracts unwelcome attention. I will not have the Lannister know I am coming. Sir Roderick protested. My lady, let me accompany you, at least. The King's Road can be perilous for a woman alone. I will not be taken to the King's Road, Catelyn replied. She thought for a moment, then noticed her consent. 2 riders can move as fast as one, and a good deal faster than a long column buried by wagons and wheelhouses. I will welcome your company, Sir Roderick. You will follow the White Knife down the sea, and hire a ship of White Harbour. Strong horses and brisk wind should bring to us the King's Landing well ahead of Ned and the Lannisters. And then, she thought, we shall see what we shall see.